Right, Scarlet Spear, here we go. First off, I'm sorry this took so long. I was sort of hoping there'd be some more story attached to the end of this event, considering the icon for the chapter is incomplete in the codex page, so I decided to wait and see. Obviously, this was relatively naive, and I was hoping to fill the latter part of this video with this imagined new cutscene, but the optimism was a touch misplaced. More on that later. Same deal as with Era last time, I will play you the cinematic and then we will peruse the implications. Let's crack on!
We're ready, Natal.
So quiet. So dark.
It only needs a voice. A spark.
But Mother...
Mother's gone. This is all that remains. But you have her fire. And more. You can finish what she started.
Finish the war.
Bring peace. Bring purity.
On Lua, the Lotus, I attacked you.
You remember?
You died.
You don't remember everything then. Yes, your aphids wounded me, and our forces were depleting fast. I knew I had failed. Failed you, my sister. Failed our family. I had no choice but to retreat.
No. You were destroyed. The Tenno made sure of that.
You're still recovering. With all that the Makers did to you, it will take time to heal.
He is one of them, isn't he? A Maker.
Finish the war, Neta.
We open on a shot of what appears to be either a sentient mothership or solar rail, or both. It seems pretty clear that this is the case. You can see the trademark hollow cylinder-like construct that the Orican rails and the railjacks have. Either way, it's surrounded by Murexes, so it appears to be the forward base Era is using for this invasion. Kinda cool to see the big boy ship in full, but aside from that, it's not really much more to see here. Moving on. From the initial dialogue in the interior of the ship, we glean that Era seems to need Natar to operate some sort of device or be a kind of catalyst in his plans. She has the voice, or spark, required that Era himself and presumably all the other sentients do not. His goal is reiterated several times throughout the scene. Finish the war. Now, what this device or machine or whatever is actually used for isn't specified, but we can kind of take a few reasonably good guesses based on our knowledge of the sentients so far. My first thought is that it's some sort of creepy sentient birthing apparatus where a queen is slung up to reproduce and serve as a source of infinite drones a la Aliens. I mean, it certainly fits with the H.R. Geiger visual cues that Dee seems so very desperate to smash us about the face with. Yes, of course I'm talking about the vagina doors. Alternatively, it could be a method of interfacing and organising the collective sentients in a similar manner to the Borg in Star Trek, which, if you haven't seen it, are a network of cyborg minds ruled by one queen. Sentient insect imagery isn't exactly uncommon, so I could absolutely see the need for a queen, especially one with all the knowledge of the Tenno that she has, to link the sentient minds and direct them in a more efficient manner. Maybe in their current state they're struggling to coordinate without a mother brain. Now, Era's line about Natar having her mother's spark points to Theory 1, and Voice to Theory 2, but frankly, if I were a betting man, and I've bought loot boxes before, I'm not afraid to admit it, I'd say it's probably both. This falls down, however, when we remember that Natar is supposedly sterile, and as far as we know has not been healed by the Temple Kuva from the Unum. Her whole Lotus persona hinges on said sterility, and it would be an odd place to backpedal now, although it's worth remembering that line from the previous prologue wherein Era refers to Nathar's eye in the void, whatever the hell that means. I'd also be very surprised if Era wasn't aware of the issue of sentient sterility, but there may be more going on with him than meets the eye, so I'm withholding judgment for now. I mean, I imagine that'd be an uncomfortable topic to talk to my sister about, so I can't really blame him. Moving swiftly on, Nathar is clearly struggling with her memories after all the manipulation she's suffered. Confused, she remembers Era's death at the hands of the Tenno, which he quickly refutes as not the whole story. Era bumbles around a bit and sounds as if he's attempting to placate her concern, brushing her off like a dithering old lady as still recovering. But even then, Nathar reaffirms her stance that her memory is correct and he did die. I really have no idea what the play is here. Is this Era the same one from before? Maybe someone reconstructed him with some choice adjustments to his mind. It's not like we haven't seen it done before. I'd certainly be more inclined to believe that Nathar was still suffering from Orokin manipulation, if not for the fact when the conversation turns to Ballas, who, side note, clearly knows more than he's letting on, Era just straight up yeets his sister at the aforementioned device or throne or whatever in almost defense of his little pet. Ballas gets a suspicious amount of screen time considering the focus of the cinematic being the two siblings, and his expressions are very interesting. His reaction when Era mentions that Nathar has her mother's fire and more is very suspect, and he seems almost pleased by her grasping the idea of finishing the war. To be perfectly honest, I can't say I disagree with him. Era's twitchiness and blatant ulterior motive, along with that very deliberate drop of Ballas's chain and them standing as equals at the end of the scene, seems to suggest that there's something more going on here than we'd first assumed. What's even more confusing if you think about it is that Ballas provides us in the Chimera prologue with the means to kill sentience in the Paracesis. The actions, you might agree, of somebody who wants us to kill sentience, maybe one in particular. Era may not be quite as in charge as we've been led to believe, and it seems to me that the long game is being played here. Who is actually orchestrating this is up in the air. Era? Ballas? Era and Ballas? Hell, we haven't seen Hunhao recently. Maybe even Wally has his gargantuan desiccated finger in this particular main plot pie. In summary, there's not much more to be said. We got very few answers with a bunch more questions, and as much as some of them are interesting, at this point I'm not afraid to say that I'm getting quite fed up with the cadence of this unravelling storyline. Warning, if you are content to live in the happy-clappy world of critical indolence, then by all means, peace out now. I won't hold it against you, I hate being salty about this, and I really don't want to turn anybody off the game, but I gotta get my rant on. Cast your minds back. Chimera Prologue was released on the 12th of October, year of our Lord, 2018. Between that and the Era Prologue on December 13th, 2019, there was a meagre wait of 427 days, and from then to Scarlet Spear it was another 103 days, making for a grand total of 530 days, which, for you maths fans, is just under a year and a half of prologues to a quest that, to my mind, was promised Christmas of last year. If DE are moving away from your second dreams, your war withins, your sacrifices, to a more drawn-out model of storytelling, they are doing a pretty piss-poor job right now. There's a notion floating around that the new war has already started, and to me, that is personally, pardon my French, fucking laughable. You have to remember that this is meant to be the climactic chapter to a story that began with the Tomb of the Sentience trailer in March of 2015. Now, I'm not a game developer, I don't know what goes into making game story, and I'm not going to say that I demand meaningful story quests every month. That is entitled and unfair, and I wouldn't expect it of them. However, the second dream was followed by the War Within less than a year later. We then had to wait a year and a half for the arrival of the sacrifice, the difference being that we got a lot more filler stories like the Chains of Harrow or Octavia's Anthem to keep us going. They can obviously manage that much. If the game keeps heading down this path towards a series of cutscenes in a tell-don't-show style of narrative, this game is going to suck for those of us who keep playing out of a love for the story. An episodic story absolutely can work, but this is a game. We're going to need more than just a tiny fleck of cinematic to keep us going each time. Scarlet Spear as an event had its gameplay problems, don't get me wrong, but the biggest issue I had with it is that I didn't feel like I was part of the narrative anymore. At least with the Era cinematic, we got to be a fly on the wall during Nathar and Era's conversation. It felt like a natural, imminent threat prologue to the main quest that was coming soon. But after all that waiting, you log in and are immediately faced with this meta cutscene with no context beyond the event is starting, open wide for a story dump, followed by a month of grinding and no real ending beyond this. DE are better than this, I absolutely know they can be. But as interesting as the Corpus origin story will be, unless it's considered part of the new war, I'm going to feel a little bit cheated. 2 or arguably 5 years of build-up, and then just faffing around with subplots when we could just as easily have had a rich and satisfying end to our first big bad story, feels pretty crummy, and I'm getting kind of worn out waiting around for plot to inch forward when I could be focusing on other games that aren't as anemic in their story department right now. Now don't get me wrong, I'm likely never giving up on this wonderful but frankly struggling narrative. Just don't be surprised if aside from Deadlock Protocol and maybe Glassmaker, if it's meatier than the other Nightwaves, you don't see a lot of Warframe content on this channel for a little while. TLDR, I'm fed up with Warframe for being a bit slow, and I'm being a big wimp about trying new things that aren't Lawframe in the gaps between. I hope the game gets its act together, but to be honest, I really doubt we're going to see an upward turn for a while, especially with all the delays and things going on at the moment. In any case, thank you very much for listening to me rant. I'm sorry this was a little negative, but it's been building for a while, and I just, I wanted to air it to you guys. Business as usual, if you enjoyed me going off like an old man in a care home, you can of course leave a like, and if you're new and would like to see whatever else I spew out next, you can subscribe. Feels a bit redundant after all that grumpiness, but peace out, I love you all, see you later.